go ahead and take all this paint off, resand it down, make sure it's back to the original wood, and then I'm gonna have it look something like this, which is basically like a farmhouse style. It's gonna have a white distressed bottom, and then the wood top on top of this. So I'll go ahead and do that right now. Okay guys, so I just finished sanding the drawers. Now if you look closely, there is a little bit of green left in the grain of the wood in certain areas of here, but I'm not too worried about that. I'm basically going to be doing 3 layers of paint over the top of this. It's a dry brush technique, so it'll cover all these green spots you see. I just wanted to leave some of the variation in color in the actual wood here. I might even go back and hit it with a little bit of stain just to give it a little bit more. But for now, everything should be fine, and this green is not going to be a problem. Okay, so now that we got all the sanding done, that's basically all the prep for this, and any type of piece you're working on, the prep is going to be your hardest part. Now we're going to start getting into the finishing. So like I said before, I wanted to keep some of this color variation, but because it was so dense, the paint in the bottom area here, I want to add a little bit more stain to it. Also these drawers that I sanded a little more than I would like, just to give that color variation, so you're going to see that underneath the paint. Basically what I'm going to be using is this Jacobian. It's from Minwax. It's a pretty dark stain. And best things I found to use for applying a stain is going to be old clothes. So old cotton shirts. I'm using a sock right here. But it works the best. It soaks up the material more than a brush would, and you get a more even coat when you're actually putting it down. Now this is going to be really sporadic. It's not going to be like a solid coat all the way around. I want it to be sporadic. I want it to have variation in color like I've been saying. So you'll see what I'm talking about here. I'm just going to apply it sporadically. And again, there's no rhyme or reason to this. It's basically to break up that one solid color. And you can even see how that turned out there. It doesn't need anything more than that. That's completely fine. And that's going to be a perfect amount of variation in color, so when I add the paint over top of this, it's going to look beautiful and all uniform. All right, so now that's it. That's about as much as I'm gonna do with the stain. I'll let it sit and dry for a few minutes, make sure it's pretty semi-dry to the touch, and since I did a very light coat, it should be done relatively quickly. After that, we'll jump onto the paint. All right, this is basically like a dark charcoal gray type of color, and we're all doing dry brushing for the entire piece. So I'm just dipping the very tip of the brush inside and then wiping off all the excess because you want it to be very dry. And this is gonna be a lighter touch than you would normally if you were painting a full piece. And again, I'm doing it in random spots because when I put the overall white over the top of this, I want this color to come out in some places, not everywhere. Like I said, very light touch. You're gonna have to keep reloading your brush. It's just to get this gray color underneath, and it's gonna mask a lot of that green, wood, and also the darker stain. I typically like to go in the same direction when I'm painting. It looks more appealing, more pleasing to the eye. So that's already finished there, and you can see in some of the light, if you can on the camera, that it's already drying. Now there's no real wrong way to do this. It's personal preference. So you can go heavier in spots, lighter in spots. You just want it to kind of flow. You don't want any choppy stops, if that makes sense. This lip here that goes around the top, this will be visible, so this will be painted. The top's gonna have wood, but I like to overdo that just a little bit, go over the top, So when I lay the wood down, if there's any knot holes in the wood or gapping in the wood, you're not gonna see just whatever's underneath. It's gonna match the rest of the piece. All right, so now as you look at the overall piece, you start to see the layering of color. And the layering of color is what's gonna make this feel authentic. So obviously this is a piece that we're restoring, we're refinishing and changing to something new. But just with the process of sanding back some of the coloring, leaving some of the coloring, adding these gray tones, and you'll see the other colors I'm gonna put on there, it's gonna give that real nice depth to the piece that it wouldn't normally. Okay, so we're starting with another color. This is going to be our second color of paint. And this is basically like a darker tan color. And again, this is going to be the same idea. Just a light dip, brush off the excess. And this one I'm going to use even more sparingly than I did the gray. Because I just want this popping in certain parts of the piece. And as you get closer, if you come in close, you can really see the variation in color at this point. So now you have that natural wood, that brown stain color, that deep gray, and then you have this nice tan over the top of it. And now you can really see the layers come to life. All right, so for the final layer of paint, what I'm gonna be using is an off-white color. Now this is gonna cover the majority of this piece. So you're not really gonna see the first couple layers as much, but that's the idea. These are just to hide underneath. And this last coat is going to cover a lot of this piece, but it's going to be light enough to where you see through. I'm using the same dry brush technique, just heavier and more coverage. And just through that, you can see the difference and what those undertone colors really do for the piece. Also too, if you notice as I'm painting, I'm trying not to stop the brush stroke in the same spot. Then you'll have a very defined line of where you start and stop. So try to keep it varied. Okay, the last step for this is we're going to be sealing all this paint that we just put on with the polyurethane. This is a Varathane. It's a water-based satin finish. And this is basically just going to give it a nice protected coat over the top of it. All right, so again, you just put a good amount on your brush, get the excess off on the sides, and do a nice little coat over the top. Okay, so what we're doing now is basically I'm going to top this with the reclaimed wood. And these are just old fence panelings, but they have that real cool grain and texture to it. So I'm going to cut these down to size, and what I'm trying to do here is I'm basically going to fit the pieces of wood within this section here. Now I could go all the way to the end or even cut this and square it off, but aesthetically I think it looks more pleasing to the eye if it's on this inner lip here. So all I got to do is measure this lip here and then cut these down to size. And I may have to cut another strip if this is too wide for the pieces. Okay, so now I have all these pieces cut and fit into the area that I need. So all I'm gonna do now is take my random orbital sander, sand this down smooth, get all the burrs off, but I wanna leave this character in the wood. And as you can see, there's nail holes, screw holes, pieces where the boards have been sitting here for a while. You can see where it's been weathered, and that's kind of the idea. I wanna keep that. That's what gives this the look. So I'm just gonna sand this up, prep it up, make sure the edges are nice and smooth, and then we'll go ahead and get down to the gluing and the nailing down. All right, so the last step we're gonna do for this is we're gonna attach these reclaimed wood pieces. They've all been sanded down. There's a little bit of burr here, but it's nothing that's gonna be like stabbing you with splinters. So when we're done with this, we're gonna hit it with the wax anyway to kind of smooth it out. So I like to get nice, even coverage all the way around, so there's no possibility for this getting any kind of air or anything in it. All right, so we're getting to the last step here, and this is basically where I'm finishing the surface. We use a poly for this, but for the wood surface here, I really like using this Minwax finishing paste. This is the special dark, and this will tint the wood just a little bit, but what it does is it actually takes away these burrs. So it'll cover up with the wax, so when you run your hand across it, you're not getting splinters, you're not getting any kind of too rough of a surface. It's actually really smooth after that. So what you do is you basically get a good amount on a regular old cloth. You can see it here. And you just rub that into the surface, and you can see immediately what it does for it. Try to get it and push it into all these cracks and grooves as well, so you have good protection. Now, this is personal choice. Obviously, you could use a polyurethane or something like that. I just like the way this comes out. It still feels like a nice natural wood top. Sometimes the polyurethanes can look a little plasticky when they're finished. So this, for me, is a better option for a sealant for this. Okay, so that's pretty much all it takes. So you're gonna let it sit for a few minutes. Then you're gonna take a clean rag and you're gonna go ahead and buff this out. And it'll give it a nice little shine. All right, so this is the finished product. A few hours of work and you can get something similar or exactly the same depending on what you want to do.